I'm Megan.
I'm CJ.
And I'm Erica.
And this is the Her Podcast.
Today we're sitting down with grief coach and mother of three, Tanis Mitchell. This one's emotional, friends. I highly recommend you grab a box of Kleenex. We hear from Tanis about the amazing journey of how her daughter nearly died while waiting for a 5-organ transplant. Tanis shared her journey while it was happening on social media, and it captivated so many people, including myself. I'll never forget checking Instagram to see the updates on little Lou and constantly praying for a miracle. Tanis is so open with us, and it's such a beautiful story of how to handle grief and how to advocate for your child. We speak with Tanis about exploring grief and trauma through the lens of a medical mama, the empowerment of feeling through grief and refusing to be a victim of the pain, how her story has impacted and shaped her perspective and growth, and how she's leading others through grief now as a grief coach. It's absolutely incredible. Like I said, grab that Kleenex. There's so many good takeaways for this one. We hope you enjoy it.
Well, we're real excited to have you on today.
Yes.
Really excited. We want to really jump in, dive in if we can.
You can,
with your story. Basically, what we would love to do is just open up the floor to really hear about you, your journey, what you've been through with your children, with Lukah specifically, and just circle back and really open up the floor for you to just share a bit of your story, and we'll jump in and ask questions along the way.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. So my daughter, it all started about 4.5 years ago. She was 11 months at the time, woke up one morning with a super healthy, normal baby at the time, woke up with a diaper full of blood and was quite lethargic, and it randomly out of nowhere. So freaked out a little bit, took her to emerge. I had Berlin, our oldest one, was 2 at the time. So it was a couple weeks of trying to figure out what was wrong. They thought it was kidney infections at first, but her blood work showed that there was some really strange stuff going on in her body, and nobody knew exactly what. They thought maybe blood cancers or blood disorders. It was just a couple weeks of tests and constant blood transfusions. She would just pee out blood every couple days.
Okay, that's traumatic.
So,
That's
I know. I just say it as if it's
I'm just you're just glazing over it, and I'm to wake up and have blood in her diaper,
totally. And
then blood transfusions. What did that feel like for you?
Yeah, multiple. It was every couple days. It was definitely traumatic at the time. It's kind of one of those things that you're just you have to do it. You don't really pause to think about it. So I feel we had to process a lot of it afterwards, because in the moment it's just you're just living it. You've got to do it. You have no other option. We had lots of family helping us out, but it was scary.
At this time, was she, so you said it's a couple weeks, was it she was in the hospital for a few weeks? There was no going home? No, it was fully in?
No, it was back and forth.
Oh, it was?
So
okay.
She was actually when she would pee blood, she would be very she'd lose a bunch of blood, obviously. So she would be really sleepy and tired, and we'd go in, she'd get a transfusion, she'd perk up, she'd be fine for a couple of days, and then we'd go back in. We did stay a couple days at the beginning, because they just didn't know. But,
and so in the beginning, you thought the transfusions, possibly when she was starting to feel better, were you okay, this, we've overcome this hurdle, this is
totally. They knew, no, they knew something was up, but they thought maybe it would be something we just find a medication and it would cure it, or it was. Yeah, so eventually about 2 weeks later, they did an ultrasound of her. They'd done some ultrasounds of her kidneys, but everything was clear. And then they did an ultrasound of her abdomen and found a massive tumor in her abdomen, the size of about a grapefruit.
Wow. And a little 11-month-old baby.
Yeah. And looking back, we were oh, it makes sense. She had a quite distended stomach. Nothing that any doctors or anyone would
so many little ones do, right? So
exactly.
Yes.
And she would vomit. They thought she had pretty bad reflux, and so we'd taken her to a pediatrician for the reflux, but it turns out it was actually the tumor pushing on her stomach and would make her vomit if she ate too much. So things like that, it made sense looking back, but obviously we had no idea. And when they found the tumor, we felt relieved. We were yes, this is it. It was a benign teratoma is what it's called. So it wasn't cancerous. They didn't think. It looked...
Isn't a teratoma...
a ball of cells. And
yes. Isn't it essentially a It's not a person.
Well, they do think that
They
actually
think it's like maybe
like
twins
a twin or something.
Yes.
Yeah, that's one of the doctors. Like that was his guess. I mean, it's impossible to know, but they think maybe at the very beginning, like we never thought that she was a twin. So obviously, like it had to be very at the very beginning. She like consumed that, and then that grew. And in the way it attached is she had an artery feeding the tumor itself. So it was pouring blood into this tumor. So it grew from the size of like a pea. They actually saw it on my in utero ultrasounds, but not until afterwards. So they didn't. So
they went backwards and looked at them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and they're like, "Oh, it was so tiny. They would have never caught it." Yeah. And who knows if that would have even been helpful at the time?
Well, they would have been like, "Okay, well, what's that? Let's watch that."
Exactly, and they would have seen it rapidly growing. But she was like so strong and healthy when this all happened. Yeah. So yeah, it was basically just like a ball of cells and weird stuff. But it was. Where it was in her body, they were quite confident it would come out okay, but they knew that they would have to take away a complete artery, but you can live with just one in your, with your main organ. So, they thought maybe they'd have to take out some of her pancreas, but they were like, worst case scenario, she'd be on insulin and it would be okay. So that's what we thought we were very excited when they found it. We felt really hopeful. We felt like this would be, a kind of a crazy, unique story, but she would continue and it would be okay. But that's not the way it happened. So she turned 1, and then 4 days after her first birthday, she went in for this surgery. It was like 9 hours long. It was quite intricate. The surgeon was like quite confident, but he also was like, from scans, we can't really see exactly what's going on. We know kind of the route we're going to take, but we don't really know.
So the surgery was to remove
this tumor. Yeah. Okay. There was no way she could live with it, because one of the arteries was feeding this tumor. It was growing at a rapid pace. Yes. And then as the blood went through the tumor, the red blood cells were shedding and being released, and that's what she was peeing out. Okay. So that explained that. They said they were very shocked. They hadn't really seen a teratoma look like this or do this. So that was not their first guess, obviously. But it was hopeful that it wasn't like a long-term like blood disorder or cancer or something that we were going to have to like deal with for a long time. Yeah. So we thought, the surgery was to remove it. We went into the children's, it was like about 9 hours. We just like waited at the hospital. We had got updates and everything seemed to be going okay. The surgeon, when she was out, the surgeon said her body was like very uniquely, like things weren't exactly where they thought. That artery that was feeding it, they like didn't exactly know where it was. It was just like very complicated, but he was quite hopeful. And he said they got it out. They think everything should be okay. And she should be up in a couple hours. She was in the PICU at that point. And that night I stayed at the hospital with her and she never woke up, and they were testing her blood and saw that her liver numbers were like rapidly increasing. And it looked like she was going into organ or liver failure at this point, and they had no idea why. Obviously the liver wasn't getting blood supply, so something had been. Yeah, there's just no blood supply. And the surgeon was like quite confused. He sat us down, me and Cody, down in his office, and said that she needed to be STARS ambulance to Edmonton. She needed a liver transplant. They didn't know what was going on. It was going to be, that was a scary moment, obviously. And same thing, we were like, okay, what do we got to do? Like, tell us where to go. So yeah, her little body was, needed a lot of support. She was intubated and basically, needed a lot of people to transport her. So we couldn't go on the helicopter with her, which was, a really hard part. We like begged for it and they were like, we need multiple transport nurses. So you can't, but, we raced. Cody's brother picked us up and we raced the helicopter to Edmonton. We got to Edmonton in like 2 hours. It was wild. And the whole time we were like, kind of the same thing when they found the tumor. We were like, okay, all we got to do is get through this next stage. Like, what do we got to do? We looked up liver transplants. We thought like, okay, I would be a donor. I've got the right blood type. Like we planned it all out.
In the car.
Yeah. We're like, this is, So the reason it was Edmonton is they're the transplant capital of Western Canada.
Got it.
So they don't do transplants in Calgary. So they looked at her scans, called Edmonton, but they didn't really know what was going on. They're just like, for sure she needs a liver transplant. So we can't keep her here. Planned it out. We got there, got to the PICU. We'd never been to the Children's Hospital in Edmonton, so it was all very new. When we got there, the transplant surgeon came down to talk to us, and this is probably the hardest moment for us. He basically told us that it wasn't just the liver, it was her entire abdomen there was zero blood supply. All her organs were failing, and she'd had 12 to 24 hours to survive. Yeah, that was the biggest moment for me. I remember just like falling to my knees and like screaming in the middle of the PICU. And he, was really upfront and was just like, we don't know exactly what happened, but both arteries were clipped, and she can't.
Oh, like by accident?
Well, yeah, we looked into it afterwards, because at that point it didn't really matter. We were just like, okay, what are we going to do? But looking into it afterwards, it turned out that her, looked so different and wrapped around places that the tumor would not have come out any other way. We had it looked into very intensely, because we're like, what happened? And actually the surgeon drove down to Edmonton the next day and was like crying in our hospital room and was just like apologizing, but he didn't really know what had happened either. So we did our research afterwards and looked into it, and we've had some really good interactions with him since. But there was no way it was going to come out, and there's no way she could live with it or without it at this point. And so, they sent her for another CT scan right after that to make sure that's what had happened, but there was just zero blood flow. So she couldn't survive any longer.
Was she awake at this point?
No.
Was she in pain?
No,
okay, she was out.
Pretty much was on life support, pretty much, yeah. So that first night, it was like constant just tweaking meds. She was like on epinephrine, everything to just like keep her stable through the night. But no, she was intubated, never wasn't in pain, never woke up. And her pain was like, or her pain management was extremely high at this point. Like it was, yeah.
And your other daughter, where was she in all this?
Yeah. So she, was back at home. So we did not bring her up at that point. We did have so when we were told that news, we called our family and friends, and we had some people come back drive to Edmonton to see us. And then some people stayed back and watched her. So she was at our house with her aunties. They all kind of moved into, my sisters and Cody's sister, like moved into our house and just like lived there for the first few weeks while we dealt with all this. So she ended up coming up a few days later, but not yet. And so she was almost 3 at this point. So that was pretty crazy. But
I know we're like in the middle of this and maybe this is not pertinent now, but the other question I always think of is, I'm like, okay, like what were you doing as a job, and your husband, all of a sudden your lives like stop and you're like, okay, we're here, we're doing these blood transfusions, and now we have to go to Edmonton and like drop everything. Like what did that look like for you guys too?
So I was on mat leave at the time, which worked out really well. I just ended up not going back, which was nice. But Cody, his job, he works at an engineering firm in Calgary, and he's been there for a long time. And they were like I cannot speak highly enough. Like this ended up being a very long time in Edmonton, and they continued to pay him. They continued to just they were like, whatever you got to do for family, we're here for you. It was amazing. We could not, I don't know what we would have done if that wasn't the case. Nobody plans for this kind of thing. So there's no leaves for that. There is a medical leave. My mom actually ended up taking it from work so she could support us, because it was we needed some more help. But so at that point, so that first night people came to the hospital. We just cried, prayed, sang all night long, waiting for her to pass, basically saying goodbye to her. And in the middle, it was
sorry, I'm interrupting again because now they've come and said she needs. So how many organs did she need?
Okay. Yeah. So they did tell us, they said she had 12 to 24 hours to survive, or she needs this, it's called a multivisceral transplant. It's 5 organs.
Right. Can you tell us what organs they are?
Yeah. So it's your liver, your pancreas, your small intestine, the bottom part of your stomach, and a bit of your colon. And then all of the arteries and blood connections that go along with that. So they didn't even really talk about that because it's such a rare transplant, and we needed 12 to 24 hours to receive it. So they did mention it, but in our brains, we were like, okay, that's not going to happen. They had actually only done 7 of them in Western Canada at this point.
Wow.
They only do them on children. There's I think there's 1 adult in the States that has had it, but it doesn't really work on adults because it's just such a massive amount. So they did tell us we needed that, but we didn't really think about it.
Because your thought would be like, well, where would that all come from?
And right now, and they had actually just done one, I think 6 weeks before. And so that too was and we met that family. They were still staying in the hospital. And we ended up being friends with them. But at that point we were like, okay, they just did one. They've only done 7 of these in the last however many years. So we were not very hopeful at that point. But at about 6 a.m. that next morning, the doctor comes in and says that her liver numbers had stabilized. They just stopped climbing. And they didn't really know why. they sent her for a CT scan, and it showed that like she had a vein that came down from her esophagus to keep her liver functioning at about 10%, enough to keep her alive. But everything else was dead at this point. So like all her intestines and everything. But yeah, they were like, she's able to survive. You need a tiny portion of your liver, and she's able to survive. So they had no idea. They're like, it was day by day at that point. Like every day we just kept, she kind of would wake up, was very like, her pain management was so high that it was like she was pretty delusional.
Yes.
But she would wake up, her stomach had distended like massively because of all like the narcotic organs. Her biggest risk was just sepsis, like that she would just go into septic shock.
Because these organs inside of her had died.
Yes. Yeah.
And they needed to come out.
Yeah.
Or she'd go into sepsis.
Totally. And we talked about like, okay, could we take the organs out and then wait for the transplant? But they were like, there's no way she'll survive a surgery right now that isn't going to give her the transplant. Like, we have to wait for that or not. So it was crazy. We stayed in the ICU in Edmonton, and every day we like, she had some really good days. She'd wake up a little bit and open her eyes, and she'd have really bad days where she was like, we'd have to increase her pain management, and then she wasn't fully with us. And it was just like a roller coaster.
And so for the transplant, would all of these organs need to come from the same person?
A deceased donor, yeah. Okay. And it had to be her size and blood type.
Oh my gosh. So you're in a place where you're hoping for a donor.
Yeah.
That would have been a child.
Totally. And she was top of the list in Canada and multiple places in the States. It works a little different. So they just called saying that's what we were looking for. But it was such a strange place to be in, because we're like, we need that for her to survive. Also realizing the other side of that is like someone's worst nightmare. And it was such a strange mental game. And so honestly, we didn't, like, even the transplant team didn't come visit us very much. They didn't talk a whole lot about that. I think everyone was pretty not very hopeful that was going to happen. And we would get excited about it and talk about like, what would life look like after transplant if that was the case? And they were kind of like, we'll cross that bridge if we come to it, like just focus on her. And we decorated her room like with pictures that she looked nothing like herself. So we decorated the room like with pictures of her. We had Berlin, our oldest, would come up constantly, but it was tricky. We spent a lot of time away from her, which was really hard, probably one of the hardest parts too, on her and on us. But yeah, every day was like, we didn't really know. She ended up waiting 7.5 weeks though, which was like wild, from the 12 to 24 hours. Whoa. So yeah, it was crazy.
And so you're in Edmonton?
In Edmonton the whole time. Yeah. And in the ICU the whole time. Yeah. So it was like the hospital literally became our home. Yeah.
Because I'm like, can you sleep there? Do they get
we slept in bed with her.
Okay.
Yeah. We had a little cot. Cody and I would take turns sleeping in her bed and sleeping on this little cot. We literally just became like the hospital became our family. The doctors would bring us coffee in the morning. We were just like living there, waiting, literally just waiting. It was like, looking back, I'm so thankful for that 7 weeks. I feel like it just got me in the headspace. I feel like if it would have happened right away, I just wouldn't have been able to process anything. Like, I know I needed that 7 weeks to process what was happening and what was her future was going to be like. And yeah, those 7 weeks, I feel like just changed me. Just speaking for myself, Cody would probably say the same, but just like changed me as a person. I feel like it was so purposeful.
Like prepping for what was to come, or processing what had happened? Both.
Like just being able to just sit and like, we could not do anything. Like every time they'd come in, we'd be like, okay, so what's the plan for today? Like, can we do this? Would this work? And the doctor's like, okay, good questions. But like, there's literally nothing we can do. We're literally just waiting on her to tell us what the next step is. And it made us just have to sit in the pain and in the like heartbreak and not be able to do anything about it. And that's kind of, it just prepped me for like, the future of life doesn't look like how you want it to oftentimes. And the acceptance of that is so hard, but so necessary. And I think if it would have happened all really quickly, it would have, like, life just moves on, and then we're taking care of her. And then we're just like, you don't get that 7 weeks to just like sit in the heartache while she just like lays there. And yeah.
Wow, that's intense. So what happens next?
Yeah, so next, so it was actually the first night, which is kind of cool, that we had us both spent away from the hospital with Berlin. So we would just swap off. We had a room at the Ronald McDonald House in Edmonton. And so when Berlin would come up, one of us would stay there with her. One of us would stay in the hospital with Lou. And and then we started trading off nights too. So only one of us would be at the hospital and the other one could sleep in a bed. So
Yes.
we had a room there, and it was the first night we had spent both away from her. So I had a friend that came up and stayed with Lukah in the hospital, and we both went back with Berlin, and we had a little slumber party with her. And in the middle of the night at 3 a.m., we got a call from an unknown number saying that there was a donor for Lukah. And we had kind of just shut that off and honestly not really thought a whole lot about it. And when we got that, Cody like got me out of bed and was like, oh my gosh, like it's happening. They have a donor. And we called like whoever answered their phone at 3 a.m. and we're like, she's going to go to surgery first thing in the morning. And this, like the whole thing is just going to change now, like the whole trajectory.
Okay, I have a question because I actually have a cousin who had cystic fibrosis and had a lung transplant, right? So I know that they, through whatever, like have actually met like the donor's family. So were you at that point like told like where the donor was coming from, like what was happening there? And then obviously we already touched on like knowing where the donor, like that was someone's worst nightmare. Like how was that for you processing?
At that moment, I didn't think a whole lot about it. Like it was just like a bit of a whirlwind in that moment, but they didn't tell us a whole lot. They told us that it was from the States. So they had to go because of the amount of time that they have to go retrieve the organs.
It's patio season, friends, and if you want to enjoy the weather, hit up a nice patio and enjoy a cold drink, then you have to check out Better Brother Brewing Co. Located on 2nd Avenue and Queen Street in downtown Saskatoon, Better Brother Brewing has a cozy little tap room and patio where they offer a variety of their craft beer on tap along with a variety of delicious beverage options. Here's something I love. If you don't drink alcohol like myself, in addition to their craft beer menu, they also offer alcohol-free options like the Black Currant Fizz, yum, a craft root beer, and you can add ice cream to order a float. How fun is that? And lots of tasty snacks. Better Brother Brewing is family friendly, you guys, so you can bring your whole crew and enjoy a cool summer drink. It's also a great spot for date nights, after work drinks, or a casual little Saturday afternoon stop. And you can mention the code HER15 to receive 15% off your next dine-in visit for the months of July and August. Better Brother Brewing also offers an off sale, so you can grab a 4-pack of your favorite craft beer to take home with you, including their special collaboration beer with the Saskatchewan Rattlers, the Rattlers Blonde Ale. Enjoy your summer to the fullest and support local. Stop by for a patio drink at Better Brothers Brewing and remember to mention HER15 to save 15%. You'll find the tap room in downtown Saskatoon on 2nd Ave and Queen Street. Follow them on Instagram at Better Brother Brewing Co. and find them online at betterbrothersbrewing.com.
It was an infant that was quite a bit younger than her, so they didn't think that would be a problem. There was also the child had died of meningitis, and so there was a possibility that could transfer to Lou. It was pretty unlikely, but we had to sign things saying that we were okay with that. But other than that, like they didn't tell us much more. And it was strange. Like her coming out of that surgery, it was so wild to be like, oh, there's another child's organs in your body that's keeping you alive. And someone gifted us that without having any idea our story or where those were going. It was like just so hard to wrap our head around.
I was going to say, I don't know if you'd ever be able to fully comprehend that.
We had this vision. My sister and I had we were talking about it a couple days after her transplant, and we kind of came up with this vision of Lukah's soul and this baby's soul meeting on a different realm and exchanging this gift. And it gave me so much comfort because we don't have control over that, even if we wanted to, and the other family doesn't either. They're just we want to gift these organs to whoever needs them. And it's the best gift we've ever received and probably the worst day of their life. And they just met on a different realm, one that we can't or ever will access necessarily in this lifetime. But it would just, it gave me a lot of peace to
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So you get this call, Luke is going into surgery. What did that look like? You were there sent her in? Like,
Yeah.
what was that process like?
Yeah, so they told us on the phone, they're like, don't come right now. Like, it's 3 a.m. There's nothing you can do. She's sleeping peacefully. We've got to go get these organs. Like,
As if you went back to sleep,
yeah, no,
though.
absolutely
Which
not.
story do you know where these organs are coming
So
from?
we
Like
just knew in the
Canada,
States.
the US?
Oh, yeah. So we knew the States, but we didn't know where. But they did say, yeah, they have to fly. They've got it's a organization called Hope. And so they've got like their private jet and they go down and retrieve them. But yeah, so they said like come first thing in the morning. She'll go in around 9 o'clock. And so we called like we had some family come up at that point, and Berlin came that day. And the day before that, we had gotten family photos done in the hospital, which was kind of cool. Berlin was already there with us the day before. We got like family photos, and it was kind of a cool, like looking back, it was like a last day that before her organ transplant. So she went in for surgery. We didn't really know how it was going to go. Like same thing, they were pretty hopeful. It was the only option, obviously, at this point. So she went in. It was a very long surgery, all day long. She got out that evening, and yeah, it was like back in the PICU. We had transferred to a different part of the PICU, but she was back in the part we started in, and she had like an ileostomy bag, which was new. So she had that for about 1.5 years after. So
what is that?
yeah, I should just say it, like no big deal. So
I'm like, I can guess, but I'm like, you should explain it properly.
So it's her small intestine, which is the part that was transplanted. They don't connect it to her original colon for the first little bit so that we can keep an eye on it. So it sticks out of her body about 1 inch, and they can keep an eye on it. So that's for the first couple of years, the intestines are the most vulnerable to like rejection or to not making it. So they keep that out. Also, then she has all her output is from there, so we can keep an eye on it and measure it. And it was like we had to keep track of it super, super carefully because intestines would be the first to not take. So she had like an ileostomy bag. It was literally like learning a different language, like how to care for her.
So it's like that's how they would pee and poop.
Totally, just poop. Yeah, but
Okay.
just poop. So that's like a different system. Was all her intestines.
Yes.
Which I don't think people understand about organ rejection.
Yeah,
That's like, and I know we're not going to go all the way into that, but I think that is a piece that people are like, oh, you get a transplant and great. And it's like, you better hope your body doesn't reject it, because that's a very real thing.
And you have no idea. And even like rejection's always, it's like a lifelong thing that you can struggle with. Like, which we're going through right now. It's like, you're never really in the clear. She did have rejection at the very beginning, which is why they just monitor them like so closely. She was in the hospital for 3 months post-transplant. And we had to stay in Edmonton even a little bit after that as like an outpatient, because it was just touch and go all the time, and seeing how she was going to react and how she'd respond to them. And it was literally so many medications, like 20 something medications at the beginning. Like it was just wild. And she had like a feeding tube, which we had to figure out how to do. She had a permanent line that she would get all her like blood drawn from, and also certain medications through there too. It was just like a whole different language, and they didn't really go over any of that before because we didn't know if that would be the case. It was like, what is happening? We were hopeful. We knew she was like going to be okay, but
did you have, sorry to interrupt, did you have like a nurse that would come and help? Okay.
Yeah, we had a whole team. It's like the transplant team that took over our care after that. So they were so like, we went to a couple like training sessions, and we would just like sit and like write notes about all the things that we'd have to like figure out for years to come, like questions about what her future would look like and what she can and can't do. And just, we just sat in these like teaching sessions and learned it all. Yeah.
I'm curious with the surgery, because it was like all these different organs. Was there like multiple surgeons, or was it like one? Like, I'm just curious, right?
Good question. Yeah, there was, as far as I know, there's 2 that we met. So there's one who's like, he's like famous up there. Like he's just like does all the transplants and is so good at it. And then he has his like fellows and his med students and stuff that help him. So the actual surgery, probably multiple people, but he's like the main one who's directing it.
Yes.
Like he had done almost all 7 of them. So she was the 8th kid in Western Canada and the first female, which is kind of cool. Yeah, little star. Yeah, she was literally just known in the hospital. Like when we got that call, we came in that morning and everyone was just like so excited for us and so excited for her. So
I know that Berlin was about 3 years old at this time. Did she understand what was going on, or how did that dynamic kind of work?
Yeah, so she turned 3 just after Lukah got the transplant, and she tried to, like, we have some cute videos of her being like, Mom and Dad are in the hospital taking care of Lukah. during it, she did really, really well, and it just was like kind of adapted, and it was okay. She struggled a lot since, like with a lot of separation anxiety and a lot of just fear of the hospital or what that's going to look like for Lukah. Like it's way harder on her now, like when Lukah has to go through all this stuff, than it is on Lukah. It's just Lukah's normal. She doesn't really even care. Whereas like Berlin, definitely it's hard for her. Yeah. And so during it was okay. After the transplant, she came up and stayed with us in Edmonton, and we kind of just, we stayed at the Ronald McDonald House a lot more, and we're able to like make that home, but it's also
not home.
It's not. And she knew it too. Like she did so well, I mean, for a 3-year-old, but it was a lot for her to process. Yeah.
So what point after the surgery, she goes in, it's all day.
Yeah.
They come out and they give you the like thumbs up. Like what was that like? And then what was the next process?
Yeah. So after surgery, they were like, it was actually really cool story. They were a little bit fearful that when they went in, all of those like dead and necrotic organs for the last like 7.5 weeks would have like, she obviously wasn't in septic shock, but they were scared that they would like they perforate them, or they would spread, or like it wouldn't. And if they're in septic shock or have any sign of sepsis, they won't do the transplant. So they didn't think that was the case going in, but they were like, that's our worst case scenario. So, but they said that her organs had they said they've never seen this before, and it would only see it in kids because they're so resilient, but they had literally walled off. It was like a sack of her dead organs. They had like created a tissue around them, and they literally just scooped it out, and it was like completely,
Oh, that's
Bodies
so cool.
are wild.
I know, we got to go see her like dead organs afterwards if we wanted to, and we did, and it was like so wild, like just insane that they were just inside her for 7.5 weeks. Yeah.
But they were like, we got you.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. And they said that there was no issues. Like everything went together perfectly. There was no signs of sepsis. Everything came out really well. And they were able to connect everything. So they were really hopeful afterwards. They were like, she's going to be okay. We don't know exactly how she's going to accept them and what's going to happen next, but it will be all right. And it was like a roller coaster. She had some rejection at the beginning. We had a lot of teaching, but it was also a lot of like, just touch and go. She was in the PICU, I think just a week, and then moved to the unit and was there for about 3 months. It was like I said, like learning a different language. Like it was wild, the amount of learning, but we had so much support, and we were in the hospital for so long that, we learned it all. And taking care of her going forward has been crazy, but it's
I'm like, how do you transition? Your life gets like thrown into this thing, right? And then now this is your new normal, like being at the hospital, learning all this, terminology. And then all of a sudden, I'm sure at one point they're like, okay, now you can go home. Yeah. And you're like,
were you like, I don't want to go home?
No, I did not want to go home.
I'd be like, I'm not leaving the safety here.
Well, and so they make you an outpatient at Edmonton first for I think we were there for about 2 or 3 weeks, which was good because, I felt like we lived at the Ronald McDonald House, but the hospital's like a block away, and she would go for checkups every day and blood work and stuff. So that was a good transition. But then I remember the day we got to go home, and it was just me and Lukah. And like packing her up, I was like terrified. Like driving home, I was like, let's move to Edmonton, which we did contemplate. We were like, I just can't leave this like city and this like the safety of here. And like the team in Alberta Children's Hospital in Calgary, like we're going to take over our care, and I knew they'd be awesome, but we just like did not want to leave. Yeah. And I remember going to the like medical supply store before we left to get all this like supplies, and I walked in, and I just like, the lady asked if she could help me, and I just like broke down. I was like, I don't know what I need. I don't want to be here. It was wild. So like so many moments like that. Yeah.
Well, and I'm like, did you come home at all when you were in Edmonton, like to your house in Calgary? Because I'm like, to even just like step into your house, or even then with your daughter, right? Like would have been like a moment.
Yeah. So we did, after her transplant, we would bring Berlin home. She was so much more comfortable at home than at the Ronald McDonald House.
Yeah.
And, so we would come home. Cody and I would meet in Red Deer with Berlin, or Lukah, or not Lukah. Lukah would stay at the hospital during nap time. It was always like, okay, she's got a 2-hour nap, like to meet in Red Deer, transfer Berlin, and then I would go home like usually for a weekend. And then we would trade back on like the Monday or whatever. So I did go home a couple times, I think 2 or 3 times. But yeah, it was so weird. It was weird to just like be home and just have these 2 kids, one of them being so fragile, and just be like, okay, now just live normal life in your house. like, this is just not.
We had like juxtaposition.
Oh, 100%. And she had like we had an IV pole. She'd get like meds through, or water and meds through her feeding tube. And there's just like so many things to do. She had an ileostomy. So it was like really busy, but also I had like no nurses anymore. It was just like me and Cody having to figure it out. So, yeah, it was wild.
So you were obviously sharing this journey online, which is how I found you, because actually, my sister and Meredith found you and was like, oh my gosh, look at this story. And like my entire family was like, like watching it unfold like in real time. And so you were sharing your journey and you had quite the community, right? Like what was that like for you?
Yeah, so weird. I remember the first times, it was right when she got her first like blood transfusion, and I shared it, and like it was just pretty much just family and friends that followed me at this point. And I remember when she got flown to Edmonton, I had written on my story like what was happening, but it was like super shocking to everybody, to us too. And that just went crazy. And I had so many people like wanting to follow along because it was in real time. And I remember writing, it was like the most healing thing for me to like write it out and share it publicly as it was happening. Like it was literally like an open journal. I would just write these posts and exactly how I was feeling, and people just connected to it and connected to like her and the process. And it was such an interesting experience for me to like show up in a vulnerable, authentic space, because I hadn't really experienced myself that way. And it was so cool to be like, people actually like, that's what the world needs. Like they actually love that and want that. And it would be like, I'd share the hard days, share the good days. Like it was just all over the place. I was like a roller coaster, but like it was just real life, you know? And yeah, the community, I don't know how we would have gotten through without it. Like we did not pay for or make a single dinner the entire time we were there. Like 6 months in Edmonton of like either Ronald McDonald House, but often we weren't there. People just, like there's one lady in Calgary who set up a meal train of Skip the Dishes. And so people would just give her money for Skip the Dishes, and she'd order us food. She didn't ask us like what we wanted because we did not have the mental capacity for it. It would just show up at the hospital every single night.
The piece of that, she just took that decision making off of your plate and made sure that you guys had food.
Did you know her?
Did you know her?
No. She's like a friend of a friend of a friend. Like, yeah.
Bless.
An
Seriously.
angel.
Yeah. And there's another lady who like picked up our laundry, because we're living out of a suitcase until we got to the Ronald McDonald House, which was a few weeks. She just picked up our laundry, folded it, dropped it back off. We never even met her. Like it was just wild, the amount of, and people would just think of these things like people would say, what do you need, let me know if you need anything, and I'm like, I have no idea sure, maybe a coffee, I don't know, like I don't know what I need. And they just like, yeah, even still we'll have like admissions like this and someone will just like send me a Starbucks card. It's like, you know it's going to be used, you know, that's like, it's so cool how people just like rally.
That's my go-to when anyone's in the hospital, especially the Saskatoon hospital, because it's like tiny and all these things, but I'm like, just Starbucks gift cards, because you know they can go eat. And it's also a break. It's actually also you have to like go get it. And I'm like, so not only now will they like treat themselves to a coffee, but they'll leave the room because they might not leave the room otherwise. Right.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, we had like nurses and doctors that would like force us to go on walks and leave, and that's exactly it. We'd go to the Starbucks across the street. We also had a GoFundMe that got started, which like was paid for, because like parking, like it is just wild, the expenses that
I can't with hospital parking.
Parking is wild. So
it's wild.
By no means is this anywhere near what your family has navigated. When my son was born, we were in the PICU for 2 weeks, and the parking, right? And so one day Andrew went down to like get a parking pass, and the guard was like, listen, there was a family that just left and told me to give, because they had paid for a full month and they were able to go. They told me to give this to a family who was just here. And so like that, I started bawling. I'm like, 100%. Somebody gifted, and then we ended up gifting the rest of it to someone else, because it was just like the things you don't think about, the cost of parking to be in the hospital with your baby.
Yeah, it's like $15 a day.
It's wild.
It's like wild. And you're like, okay, you're not going to not do that. And even just like the mental capacity of like paying for that every single day, or scared you're going to miss it. We got so many parking tickets. Yeah, just like so many things that, and food and coffee and gas. And it's just like, and the other cool thing is we were there over Christmas, and there was a family in Okotoks that I didn't know at the time. I do now, like basically just like did Christmas for us. Like they did a big fundraiser in Okotoks, and then just like the girls have never had more gifts, probably never will have as many gifts as they got that Christmas. It was wild. But yeah, just like, and for Cody and for and yeah, it was so cool. Like the community was insane. Like sometimes I forget about it, and then I talk about it and I'm like, I don't think we would have ever managed, which is cool, because it was like an outlet for me to just share. Like I I would have done it if there was 20 followers or tons, because it just felt so good. Yeah. It was so
therapeutic, it sounds like.
100%. Like, I loved it, and it got me through so much. And then also just the support and knowing it was received, and all the encouraging messages, and all the people that we met, and the medical community we made. And I just felt so held. Yeah. Even still. Yeah.
So obviously, like, this journey would have been so much, you know, grief and trauma that you've walked through. And I'm curious to hear how you started processing and working through some of that. And obviously I know you talk a lot about grief. And so I'd love for you to share what your journey has been like, and sort of your outlook on grief.
Yeah. Yeah. So it kind of started just in the hospital in those 7.5 weeks. We read so many books and listened to so many things that just like trying to figure out how to stay in the moment of like not knowing the future. I remember we'd have people, and nobody, this isn't a bad thing. It was just like people didn't know how to respond. And I probably would have done the same thing, but praying so much for a miracle for her. And I remember when I would hear that, I would just like, it didn't feel good. I was like, I don't really, like, what is happening right now is the miracle. Like, her life that she's lived is a miracle. The lessons we're learning right now already are. And it would just kind of take me out of the moment of like right now, because we didn't know if we would have the miracle that we're hoping for. You know, it just, some of those ways of thinking just take us out of the painful mess of right now. And there was no way out of it for us. We had to sit there. And so figuring out how to do that, it was definitely so many traumatic things that happened during then. But then also like the grief piece, I felt so much grief during that, but also after that, even still. But I felt like there wasn't a whole lot of room for that, because she made it and she had the transplant. She was going to be okay. And we have our daughter, and we're so thankful for that.
Hey everybody, it's Erica. You guys know I love a quality handbag, and I recently found a luxury resale company that I have to share with you. Working Girls Boutique offers a stunning selection of gently loved luxury handbags and a safe, reliable, and secure way to purchase your dream bag. They have a strong commitment to authenticity and choose carefully curated pieces in excellent condition, which include Prada, YSL, Louis Vuitton, and they have a stunning Chanel collection, which is 100% on my dream list. One thing I love about Working Girls Boutique is how seriously they take making sure each piece is authentic. Ensuring authenticity of luxury items is a serious business, and Working Girls Boutique prides themselves on thoroughly checking every item they choose to the highest degree. They even use AI technology so you can feel super secure about the bags you are investing in. Working Girls Boutique also offers a flexible payment plan so you can secure your dream bag without breaking the bank. Plus, you know, they gave us an exclusive discount code for the Her community, which is amazing. It's code HER50 to save $50 off your purchase. If you're like me and constantly looking for that next dream bag to add to your closet, you can find all the details on the newest designer additions on their Instagram at Working Girls Boutique, and head to their website wgboutique.com to secure your dream bag. Don't forget to use the code HER50 for $50 off your purchase, and 100% make sure to tag me because I want to see what bag you snagged.
But there's so many grieving elements of like life just not looking how we wanted. And even now, like when she gets sick or what her future is going to look like, there's just so many elements of grief that I just never thought of. I just always kind of thought grief was like death related, and obviously 100% it is, but there's just so many levels of it and so many. Yeah. And I had this like deep, and I didn't feel this right away. It was probably only a couple of years ago that I really thought about grief like that, because I had all these feelings and all these, ways of, that I felt like I needed to process grief, but I couldn't really even use that word. I didn't really use that word. And then I read this book by Francis Weller, and it's called The Wild Edge of Sorrow. And he basically talks about like, there's 7 different kinds of grief, and it's like the simplest forms, like everyone would fit into one of those 7. And it was so, transformational for me. I was like, yes, that's exactly what I feel. I feel so much grief, but I feel like I don't really have room to process that as grief. I did lots of reading, also lots of counseling throughout all of this, like it just over and over again, and for the girls as well. And and kind of got to the point where like I really felt like I was far enough out of it where like I really wanted to help people through that, and like share my story personally while also knowing that like I'm not the only one. Obviously our story is unique, but like the idea of like accepting what life throws at you with like, with grace and strength, while also realizing it's really hard and it's okay for it to be really hard, and you can sit in that like hard pain, and know that like there's a purpose to it is my goal to help people through that.
So what does her life look like now? Like I know she's currently in the hospital. She's currently in the hospital right now. I don't know if you can share anything about that, what's going on there, but then also like, what does her life look like that you know of so far? Like, are there limitations to what she can do, where she can go? Like, what will that look like for her?
Yeah, it's been like, we thought that it was going to be a lot more limitations than there is, but then we have times like this where like it's like a bump in the road and we're like, oh, okay, reality hits that like she could end up in the hospital for weeks. It'll probably be there for a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks for sure, which is a long admission for her.
Because right now, what's going on?
Yeah, so she had it was so random. Like we get monthly blood work, and sometimes it's easy to just like be like, oh, she's fine, or skip it, or like sometimes they'll call us and be like, it's been 6 weeks, like why have you done your blood work? And because she just like has been so healthy, and usually her hiccups are when she gets sick. She gets a virus or something that she needs some help fighting. She usually goes in for some fluids and she's okay for a couple of days. But we do get the monthly blood work. So we got a call last week saying that her blood work didn't look very good, or 2 weeks ago. And they're like, can you repeat it in a week? Maybe she just has a virus. She often doesn't show signs of sickness just because she's immunocompromised. So sometimes she doesn't show the like immune responses. And when she does, then it's usually pretty bad. So we're like, well, she seems fine, but okay. And we repeated it. And her liver numbers were just like really high, like scary high. And she was like, when the doctor called me, she's running around the park. Like, I was like, are you sure? Like, she looks great. Right? It's always that way though. She's just she doesn't complain about anything. She's so resilient. I think she's also not used to feeling, or she is used to feeling just kind of like, probably not 100% all the time. And she's okay with it.
How old is she right now?
So she's 4.5. Okay. Or sorry, 5.5. I'm like,
well,
it's been 4.5 years. She's 5.5. She turned 6 in October. Yeah. So anyways, they called us and said she needs a liver biopsy, which is like a minor surgery. And she hasn't had one in a couple of years, 3 or 4 years. So we went in and it just showed that she was experiencing rejection. She has not had that since the very beginning. And it's like a scale of 0 to 9. And she was at like a 6/7. So like a pretty moderate rejection. And we were shocked. But they did explain like intestinal rejection, which was her biggest risk at the beginning. You would see through like vomiting and diarrhea and like GI stuff. But the liver, it's like often doesn't show unless it's like till it's like too late. So that's why we do this monthly blood work. It made so much sense. So she's on a really high dose steroid to reverse it, and it's reversing. It's just slow. It's just a process of like, she gets the IV. She's got to be in the hospital because she's got the IV steroids, and then she'll be on it oral for a couple months after that. But just a little bump in the road. It's very like, I feel like we get to a place where like life is so normal and we just like kind of forget about it. But, we thought like we'd never be able to travel with her. We wouldn't be able to like, do many things, but we totally have. Obviously there's lots of medications. She's on only like 4 medications now, and she'll probably be on those lifelong. But it's gotten so much easier, and she can do most things. She doesn't really like a whole lot of like high intensity, like physical sports and stuff, which is good because they did say there probably would be some limitations there, but she doesn't like them anyway. She wants to like dance and sing. So it's perfect. Works out awesomely. Yeah. So, as regards to that, the biggest thing is just infection. So anything like we try to keep her, like hands really clean, not playing in things that like she could have it. Like, we haven't done a whole lot, honestly. We kind of just trust the process. She's a kid. Like obviously when she's like 2 or 3, we're like, you're going to play in the dirt. We'll wash your hands good. I don't know. Yeah. So they warned us of a lot of those things, but, we kind of just like take it as it comes. And she's such a chill, hilarious kid that hasn't been too hard. All of those limitations. Things like will she be able to get her ears pierced? They're like, well, maybe. She also like, it totally depends on where she's at because infection with that. There's like kind of everything we do. We have to clear with her Edmonton team. Yeah. Right. Like she's not supposed to be around like birds, like rodents. Like we can't have those as pets. Like just silly things that I'm like, yeah, I know. No rodents.
Will that be like a hamster?
Yes, I know.
Like a guinea pig.
Yeah.
Don't want any of those. So that works out great. And like cats is another one. She can be around them, but they've advised probably don't have them as a pet. But if we really wanted to, we could probably figure it out. There's just lots of like, little things like that we just clear with her Edmonton team. She goes up there every year and we talk about all that stuff for like what the next year is going to look like. Yeah.
So every time that you have, a bump in the road, how does that affect you internally? Like, I would imagine that's pretty triggering, or how do you navigate that?
Yeah, good question. I find it's, like at the beginning when she would have bumps or like we'd end up in the hospital, it was like, especially like she had a reversal. She reversed her ostomy when a year and a half post, so about 3 years ago. And it was like a planned surgery, but like going back to Edmonton for a surgery, it was just like, that was really hard. Like I just felt like something was going to go wrong. I just felt like we were going to end up here for another 6 months or something. That was really difficult. And there's been certain admissions where like she's just sick and nobody knows why. We never, honestly, half the time we don't even get answers. It's just like, well, I don't know. Her body figured it out and we don't really know. So at the beginning it was really hard. Now I feel like it's almost like I've just realized we have zero control, that it almost doesn't really like, it's more the logistical things that are hard, but the actual like emotionally, it's like, okay, this is the way it's supposed to be. We'll figure this one out too. If it ends up being really serious, then we will deal with that. Like I've just like realized my lack of control, but also like the things I can control, which is just like the way I react, the way that like I react with her, the way our family deals with it, all of that. I just feel like I have to switch my mindset to be like, okay, what can I control? How do I want to show up here? How do I want to see myself in this situation? Yeah, it's definitely tricky. Like,
So you've mentioned that you did a lot of counseling. What other supports did you find really helped you in this journey?
I'd say like the community is the biggest. Like I've made just friends with other parents who like deal with this kind of stuff on the daily as well. And it's like, it's just an immediate connection of like, oh, you know what it's like to have a kid who who's medically complex, that people don't really understand, or just that is like, tomorrow you might end up in the hospital. Today is really great. Like just the roller coaster of that, having people to understand it has been so good. So we've got like, a little community of friends there online, a lot of it online.
If you were like, if someone approached you, and I have no idea, but I would assume you get some DMs from women or parents, I should say, who are like, my kid just got like, this is what's going on, or I've heard of your story. Is there like advice or anything you can give of a parent who might be going through something like this?
Yeah, it's interesting because I have had a lot of people who like watched our story, thought that would never be their story, and then end up with a kid who is sick, or they're sick themselves. And I've had so many people like message me like, I've followed you since the beginning and now we're dealing with this. And and I think the biggest, I'm sure everyone would, something would help everyone differently. But I think the biggest advice that I would give is just like to let it be hard when it's hard, but to not stay there. And I think it's so easy to just like get in this victim mentality of like, why is this my life? Why do I have to deal with this? They don't have to deal with this. Like, I didn't want my life to look like this. There's got to be something someone can do. It's like that acceptance piece, but also while at the same time, not bypassing the like difficulty and the pain, and trying to sit there when you need to sit there, and cry when you need to cry, and scream when you need to scream, and lean on the people around you. And also just realize that like there is purpose. It's because we can't control it. It's supposed to be this way. Life isn't supposed to look a different way, because it won't. It doesn't.
How was it, Kay? You have another child now.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
Right. There's three. There's three.
So I'm curious.
Let's give some airtime to
baby Cypress. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, what was that process like for you to decide to have another child after you'd gone through this? I'm not even going to I'm just curious what that process
it was a process. I never really thought that would be part of it, but I also, there was this piece for Cody and I both that were like, we don't really know what Lukah's future is like. She was very stable she even still with this hospital admission, she is in a very stable place. And once she was, we were like, okay, this feels like the time. If we are going to introduce another baby, this would be the time. We're not in and out of the hospital very much. I don't think we had been. And actually COVID was really helpful for that in that sense, because everything was like super sanitized, no germs. We're like, this is great. So she was like very healthy through that. And we went back and forth often. We always thought we wanted more kids, but we also just like, I couldn't imagine going through something like that again. Yeah. We had a lot of genetic testing done too, to make sure that it wasn't something that created this tumor, and nothing came back positive. So we were when I was pregnant with him, we did like a ton of they probably had like 15 ultrasounds to make sure there was nothing missed, but we were pretty confident. Like, it's almost like we've already done that. What are the chances of that happening again? I think we're in the clear.
Lightning doesn't often strike twice in the same place.
Exactly. Yeah. So that was I wasn't really worried about that. I was definitely worried. My biggest fear was like the balance of when she is in the hospital, which honestly is the hardest part of having another kid and another needing more help. But it's also been okay. And it was also really healing in a lot of ways to be like, he doesn't know Lukah outside of that. He's just part of our family. It's just part of the life we live and we manage it. And he just like, it's also cool to watch Lukah be able to experience being like a big sister and some of the like focus off of her too, because it's always just been like, what does Lukah need? What's life going to look like? And she's like, I'm pretty normal. I'm doing pretty good. And now we can introduce another baby. So it was like, it's been hard for sure, but also really cool and healing and normalizes life a little bit. Like, we can manage that. Wow. I think sometimes.
Well, I remember, and this is, I remember when I saw you were pregnant, like in my head, and this is my outside, like all of a sudden I was like, oh, like you can have a really traumatic experience and still have life after. And I think the traditional thought would be, we're done. We're focused on our medical kid. Like nothing else is happening. We can't introduce anything else. And instead it was actually this, I remember it being like, oh my gosh, like, like they probably wanted more kids. Just because that happened doesn't mean you know, depending on her, I'm sure you were like, had it been a different story and she was, sorry, now I'm doing it, high medical, like, and you were like, okay, we actually can't. But I thought it was like a really beautiful representation of really life going on and not necessarily staying in the trauma forever.
Yeah, that's like a constant lesson we're learning. Even when she is admitted, it's like, okay, how much of like normal life do we still live? How much do we like put all of our energy and effort right there? But it is just like normal life. It's not like the traumatic stuff for sure, but that acceptance piece of like, this is the way our life looks. And it's hard at times. There's also so much beauty there. We also would love to like introduce another kid to this like beautiful life that we have. And this story that he now will get to know Lukah as, and Berlin too. She doesn't really remember much more. So it's just like, it's just the way it is. And it's a cool way to like experience their like resiliency, experience our own and witness our own. And that's exactly what it was. It was like, okay, we can actually like, life does go on. Yeah.
Was there something that like surprised you either about yourself or about the journey, you know, in reflection, looking back and being like, oh, like it didn't, I mean, the whole thing you probably obviously didn't anticipate, but even in just the way that you handled it or something that you learned from it?
Yeah, I think I just never pictured myself. Like, I haven't been through a whole lot of like really intense stuff in my life. I just never pictured that for myself. And I think like looking back and being like, wow, you actually have like strength that you just will never tap into if you don't have to. And when you do, it's like there and it's real and people show up. I think like just feeling so not alone in this, like ever, is so cool. And just, tapping into the strength that like, and bravery that like I saw in my kids, I saw in myself. I'm just, it makes me really, hopeful for the future. I'm like, no matter what happens, I truly think like it's going to be okay. I trust the process of life, the unfolding of it. And I don't know if I would have ever said that before. I'd be like, no, I'd like control. I'd like, this is what I want my life to look like. If it doesn't, maybe just like minor changes, but like now I'm like, I don't know, I guess I've got dreams and vision, but like that could change, that could shift. And I trust that if it does, it's okay. Yeah.
Well, and so now you've taken, we should talk about this, you know, your grief and your experiences and what you've learned, and you're now a grief coach, right? Yeah. And so how did you sort of come about choosing to step into that, and what does grief coaching look like?
Yeah, so I knew after things had kind of settled down that I wanted to do something in that area. I went back to school to finish my degree in undergrad in psychology, and liked that for a little bit, but it was so like far removed from like the tangible intensity of like what was actually going on in people's lives. It was just so much of, which schooling often is, it's like you got to start there, but I was just like, I needed more than that, or like needed it to be more tangible. So decided to take like a life coaching course at first that wasn't specific to grief and trauma. And took that, and then I have taken some grief and trauma courses on top of that. And they always just feel like so close to home. Like when I learn about it and read about it, I'm just like, that's exactly how I felt, and that's exactly what was helpful. That's exactly what wasn't. And yeah, I just have this huge desire to like walk people through that, and just to know that like there is a million different kinds of grief and forms of grief and ways of dealing with it. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but like having someone walk you through it. Also the community element, I really love group coaching. And so I've started like a book club, which is the first book actually that I read when Lukah was in the hospital, and doing a group coaching book club on that. So it'll start in the fall.
Now I want to know the book. What's the book?
It's called Option B by Cheryl Sandberg.
I've read it.
Yeah, it's just changed my...
You like, CJ's, I was like, I know that book. Like with everyone, I'm like, I don't know it.
No, we had a guest earlier today that mentioned 2 books, and we were all like, nope, don't know that one.
Oh,
okay,
nice.
That's true.
Like, don't know everything.
You're on the pulse, I feel.
It is a pretty popular book. I'll give you that. But yeah, someone had gifted it to me in the hospital, and it just like changed my perspective on, acceptance of like, your life is not, even in the smallest ways, it's not going to look like your option A. No one's does. And when we can choose option B and fully choose it, then we like actually take our power back, and we have control over our life in the way of like how we deal with it. And, she just gives this line. She's like, if we don't get option A, then we can kick the shit out of option B. Like, yes, that's like, so it was just so, it was so transformational for me. So, it's going to be like a small, intimate group setting of like, 6 people, and we're going to do a book study on it. So I'll like create the content and the questions and facilitate the conversation and build that community. She also talks a lot in the book about like preparing ourselves for those events that we didn't plan. It might not be in the moment. It might not even be something that like you've dealt with before, but like we will experience it, and also trying to, or figuring out how to help our kids through resiliency and being resilient adults, and choosing that. So yeah, I love the community element of coaching. I think that like that was so helpful for me, or would have been so helpful for me to be like in something like that, with people going through that or wanting to challenge themselves the same way. And then individual coaching as well. So walking through that process of acceptance of not wanting to be where you are, and then choosing it, and living into it, and just walking people through that.
Is there any other resources, you might have not had them while you were in it, but even like coming out now and like leaning into grief, resources where someone's like going through grief, and you think would be like really valuable, that you enjoyed, which is maybe this book, but is there anything else that comes to mind? Yeah,
besides like just like therapy and leaning on the people around you. I mean, this is kind of a simple one, but music was like the biggest thing for me. I've created a playlist actually that I just shared on my social media of like different songs that just like, we had music playing constantly when we were in Lukah's room, like 24/7.
I have to say this. It was like 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Like you share songs. Sometimes you'll just be like, I came across, so I haven't seen your whole playlist, but you shared a song and you were like, I just came across this song. You were like, it's so upbeat. It's going to be my summer song. And I like went and downloaded it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. So absolutely. That's something that I've noticed.
It totally just like gets me through.
Music can be so healing and powerful.
Seriously. Yeah, in another life, I would have been a musician. Definitely the furthest thing from, which is probably why I like it so much. But
is that like option C? Getting down to option J, stretching it out.
That's funny.
I love that.
Yeah.
So music is something that you used to help yourself.
Yes.
Through things
And even still, like it's, I feel like it just gets me in a different headspace and like brings on the emotion so easily for me. And another thing is just like letting the tears come when they need to come. Like for so long I felt like you had to have a reason for them, or you had to be able to explain them, and then once you could explain them, then it was like they were justified, as opposed to just like, you can't actually control the emotion. You can try to, but like it's part of the process. And so just like letting yourself feel it, the anger, sadness, happiness, joy. Like I also felt like I couldn't experience joy when Lukah was going through everything. Like if I did, it was like I somehow was abandoning her or abandoning the like pain of the situation. When really grief is like, it's both. It's like being able to be in the pain and know that there's like beautiful parts of it and there's joyful parts of it, which is like wild. You actually get to experience both. It's like such a mixture of the gray, the and, the both. Yeah.
What does your self-care look like?
For me, it's definitely like, I am such like an extrovert, and I love being surrounded by like my friends and my family. And, I found it hard to experience like fun, to have fun with people when like life was heavy. And even still, like she's in the hospital, and, I'm like, okay, do I still go out and do like the things I had planned, the fun evenings that I had planned? And for so long, I would just be like, no. And then I would just feel so disconnected from myself, because that's like how I experience my, my joy, my being around people, having conversations with people, and not having to have that be like you're like all consuming, even though often mentally it is. So it's, doing fun things. My self-care. Also, like journaling was like huge for me. I think I went through like 1 million journals. And like meditation, and also exercise, like, and that's a new one for me, but like, cause that wasn't really a thing when Lukah was sick, but even now I'm like just moving my body and like trying to connect my body and my mind, like, sweating out the emotion is so helpful for me. And like alone time, as much as I love being around people, just like and it's usually actually in the car, which is funny because we've thought about moving closer to the hospital. We're about 45 minutes from the hospital, and we've thought about moving closer so many times. And honestly, like the drive sucks. Like things like this, we commute back and forth every single day, but it's like, usually I don't have the other kids with me, or, if I do, I'm like, okay, you get a song, then I get a song. And like, just, that's usually when I like can process a little bit, when I can just like cry and sing. And, the drive is good. That's usually my alone time.
That's like underrated.
I was just going to say, there's literally nothing like being alone in the car.
It's the best.
It's the best.
That's when people ask me, because I live like 45 minutes outside of the city, and when people are like, the drive. Yeah. I'm like, are you kidding me? I've had some of my best concerts in there. I'm like, it's like my best cries, like my best conversations, like maybe sometimes even on the phone, where I like call my dad and I'm like, let's visit, I'm driving. I'm like, it's highly underrated spending
100%.
That very private, quiet time together.
I remember even saying to Cody with his commute to work, like he's got a pretty long commute to work too, and I was like so jealous of it. I'm like, an hour each day? Like, yes, alone in the car?
Oh my gosh. You get to listen to whatever you want. Right? Nobody's asking you for stuff.
100%. Yeah. It is underrated. I mean, if you didn't have to pay for gas, that would be even better. But
okay. This seems like a really like, I just want to talk forever and ever to you. But I know we don't want to take advantage of your time. But we do like to ask our guests a final question. Mm-hmm. And that is, and I'm sure you're going to have a lot to say about this, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever been given, or that you like to give to people?
Yeah, I guess I kind of touched on it, but I think the best, it answers both those questions, is this idea that life is happening for us and not to us. And when I think about whenever life feels really hard, I'm like, if I can transform my way of thinking to like, I am not a victim of life. Life is not happening to me, and I just have to like figure it out. And this is so sucky and painful. It's like, life is happening for me. All of these events are teaching me things about myself, about the people around me, about how big and beautiful life actually is. And I often use that quote talking to people going through hard things. Like, what would you do differently if life was happening for you and not to you? How would your mindset shift? How would your daily life look different? Yeah, it's a big one.
So can you please also tell our community where they can find you, follow you, how they can work with you and connect with you?
Yeah, so I've recently created a business of grief coaching, and it's called Hope and Stones Coaching. Hope and Stones Coaching. So I've got my website on my Instagram page, so you can search me. It's Tanis Mitchell. And my website is there. You can read a little bit more about my story. I've got my blog posts up on there. And you can also book individual sessions or group coaching sessions. This book club is starting in September. I've got 2 more spots. So, check it out. Also love to share lots of like quotes and reels and things about all of this on there as well. So,
amazing. Go give her a follow, you guys. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's like I said, it's so therapeutic to talk through it and to just like share it. I absolutely love it. So it is my honor. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Tanis. Thank you everyone for joining us on this episode of the Her Podcast. If you want to follow along with us, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at its.her.podcast. We can't wait to see you there.
Bye.
Bye. Adios.